Are you someone that's wondering how the houses in Washington, Oregon, California, or anywhere besides Idaho compare to the houses in Idaho? Well, in this video, I am meeting with my friend Brandon with Elite Inspections, and we are not only going to talk about his experience moving from Washington to Idaho, but also his experience over the last 13 years being a home inspector and what are the kinds of things he saw in homes in Washington and in Idaho, and some things you can look for when you are shopping for a home right here in Idaho Falls as well. You ready? Let's get started. What's up guys, Annika here with the Anderson Hicks Group. If you're new to my channel and you want to know all there is to know about life in Idaho Falls and the surrounding areas, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell and you'll be the first to know about all things happening in Idaho Falls. Well, let's get started. Thank you so much, Brandon, for being here today.
Yep, great to be here.
This is Brandon with Elite Inspections. Do you say Idaho Elite Inspections?
Idaho Elite Inspection Team is kind of the official.
Okay. Yeah. Does it say? Yeah, it says it right there.
Yep.
Well, first I want to say thank you for being here, and I would love to interview you and talk to you about your experience coming from Washington to Idaho. So start with your background. Are you originally from Washington?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in a town called Federal Way, which is King County, basically the Seattle area. And so that's where I grew up. And then when we got married, we moved back to Federal Way and started our family and lived there for about 7 years. And then it was 2019 when we finally decided it was time for us to move here. And so we made that move, and it's been a great move for us. So we can go into that a little more if you want.
Yes, I would love to. So I'm also not originally from Idaho. I'm not sure if we talked about that before, but I've only been here for 3 years and I absolutely love Idaho Falls. But what brought you to Idaho in the first place?
We get this question all the time, and I tell people it was just the good Idaho life, you know? So we just wanted a little bit of a slower pace.
Okay.
For our kids, really it was a family decision. You know, we found a home that we love in a great neighborhood. Our kids, you know, ride around in their little motorcycle bike gang in the summer times. And so just a more family feel, honestly, is what it really came down to.
Awesome. Some similar reasons to why I moved here. God, guns, and freedom, really.
Yeah.
And family. I guess I should add family. Those are great reasons. Now, it's like 5 degrees outside. Now, out of the 6 years you've been here,
Yeah.
Is this unusual or is this pretty normal?
This is pretty much normal for us. I mean, this time of year you get a little bit of a warmer spell maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But being in the single digits this time of year is pretty normal. I think we're actually supposed to get a little bit of a snowstorm here this weekend maybe, so
yeah.
We'll kind of see, but you just roll with it. I mean, really the difference comes, either you just get all the rain all winter long for basically 9 months was what I was used to growing up, right? Versus just having a few months of some of that cold. But either way, you just buckle down, you own it and say, hey, it's going to be cold, so let's just get ready for it.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're dressed appropriately, it's not a problem.
That's right.
And you're in your car, and then you're in your office and in your house. So yeah. Tell me a little bit more about how long you've been an inspector, why you started to be an inspector, and why you're still an inspector, and tell me a little bit more about Elite.
Yeah, and so that actually ties us back into my Idaho roots. My parents grew up in Idaho, both of them. My mom actually grew up in Aberdeen, so not too far away. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up getting my degree in construction management from BYU, Idaho. And so I had spent some time out this way, and so loved the area when I was here. We got married, moved back to Washington, and so this was just kind of one of those places. So with my background in construction and construction management, that's where we kind of made that transition of, you know, maybe home inspections would be an option for us. And honestly, it was just a kind of a part-time moonlighting gig after my construction management job, you know. Mm-hmm. And so we started the inspection company in Washington in 2013, and just kind of rolled with the market. Things really picked up, got making enough money where we were able to leave the full-time job, start inspecting full-time, and then we ended up growing our team a little bit. And so we hired on some additional inspectors for some help and some office staff that we really were proud of the business there we built. And then we ended up selling it actually just a few years ago to actually one of our competitors, but he was looking for some growth and expansion, and really worked out really well for us.
That's great. And so it wasn't Elite Inspections in Washington. Elite was born when?
Elite was born in basically 2019. As soon as we moved here, we
Okay.
knew we were going to kind of start a new company, and so we ran it, the business in Washington virtually. We had a great team, great staff, allowed us to get our feet under us here and get going with inspections out here too.
Okay. And from a business owner standpoint, how has it been owning a business in Idaho and like quickly building over the last few years?
We've seen lots of growth. The market's been a little bit more challenging the last few years, but we just continue with providing a great inspection. We're fully confident in ourselves and our ability to serve our customers, and I think as you do that and just kind of a business mindset of providing great service, you just naturally see growth every year.
Yeah, I love that. And you just consistency, right?
Right.
And building relationships. Yeah, Brandon's been amazing, and he's built his team. I've seen you go from, well, I don't know if I met you when it was just you, but you've grown with other inspectors, and Elite's done an amazing job. All my clients have been super happy. Just check out all of his reviews. He's got amazing reviews. They really are very professional. You can tell they wear professional clothing. They speak professionally. They're very eloquent. They show up on time, and they create a beautiful report, and they have great customer service for my clients. So that's why you're here, because I've been thoroughly impressed with you and with your business. And now I'm excited to talk about the juicy stuff.
Yep, let's do it.
Let's talk about the houses. So what are the key differences you're seeing in Washington homes and Idaho homes?
Yeah, that's a great question and very interesting. I came out here and I didn't even cross my mind that the houses might be a little different. In fact, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I did my first inspection here after we had made the move. And I was just blown away that this house was 5 or 10 years old and it didn't have any gutters. And I'm like, where's all the water going?
Yep.
And so it didn't even cross my mind that we're the high desert and we just don't get that much rain. Now, we still recommend you have gutters, obviously. You want to control where the water's going. We've got lots of finished basements, which is another big difference here, right? So last thing you want to have is a bunch of water finding a way into some crack or something in your foundation and into your house, right?
Yep.
And so one of the nice things about inspecting a home here in eastern Idaho is, like I said, lots more finished basements, where in Washington, they don't have to dig the foundation as deep. And so there's lots of crawl spaces.
Yes.
And not my favorite to go in a crawl space, but you do what you got to do. But it is nice that we don't have so many crawl spaces to dive into.
Okay. And along those lines of water, obviously Washington has a lot more, it's just more wet in general. We've got a lot of snow, but I totally get the rain gutter thing. I keep getting questions about flooding. Do you know anything about flooding in Idaho? Do you think it's a big problem? Do you think there's areas that flood more than others?
Just since we've been here, we've had a few big storms where there's been some flooding taking place within some basements, and that is obviously, you get a little bit more sensitive to that just because you have a finished space at the bottom of your house, right? And so, you get water in there, and we've dealt with it ourselves in our own home over the years a little bit, and just have to deal with that. But in terms of areas, typically, no, not really. We just don't have that much moisture aside from, kind of the freak little storms that we get on occasion.
That's perfect. Okay, so what other differences do you see from Washington homes and Idaho homes, if any?
Well, obviously, one of them is we have a lot more extreme weather here. So in the summertime, we're getting lots of heat. Cool. In the wintertime, it's lots of cold, right? So insulating is a really big one for us as well. I've shared this story all the time. Probably 2 or 3 times a year, we'll even inspect some brand new houses, new construction homes that the builder just forgot to insulate the attic, and so, most home buyers don't think that they need an inspection on a brand new house just because it's brand new. What could go wrong, but most people aren't going to take the time to poke their head in the attic and check, is there actual insulation there? One of the tells actually that we'll notice on occasion is if it's wintertime and your house is the only house that's got that's not got any snow on the roof at all, you're losing all your heat through the attic, and it's just warming up that roof, and you're melting off the snow, right? So that's a sign that potentially you don't have insulation in the attic.
Oh, I never thought about it like that. So if you have more snow on your roof, that means the heat is staying in the house.
Potentially,
is
yes.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
It could be a sign.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I never thought about that. Yeah. And I agree, it's super important to get an inspection even on a new construction home. Brandon actually just performed an inspection for me on a new construction home, and nothing major came up, luckily, on this one, but it did have a good list of things that needed to be addressed. And this builder is actually really awesome. They just say, send me the list. And the reason why I like this is because when builders and contractors are in the house constantly, I think they kind of miss things. They're just used to the house, I guess. Whereas an inspector comes in with brand new eyes, seeing the house for the first time, they're going to notice staining, chipped paint, missing doorknobs, whereas people building it might just pass it by. Yeah. And so getting an inspection on a new construction is super helpful, because now you have a list to send back to the builder and say, hey, Mr. Builder, finish the job, and then everybody wins.
Yeah, and it really comes down to the details, right? Especially when you're buying a brand new house. Say it's $450,000 and it's brand new, never lived in. Like, you want that thing to be spick and span, almost perfect, right?
Yeah.
It really just comes down to the details a lot of times. And it's pretty common that we'll find something, one detail or two that are kind of bigger issues. Like we talked about the insulation, on occasion we'll find a plumbing leak or two, electrical issues. And you really just want to know about those things ahead of time before you move in. And now you're trying to scramble, trying to get the builder back out there after you've already close and they've got your money.
Yeah, exactly. And even cosmetic things. I think I heard of an inspection, whether it was mine or somebody else's, I don't remember, but the shingles, like one part of the house was one shingle and the other half of the house was a totally different shingle. Like the roofer missed it somehow, and that was caught on an inspector or on an inspection, and the roofer had to go back and fix it, because on a brand new house you don't want two different looking shingles.
Yeah, and they're just building so fast because we're just growing like crazy, right? And so you just don't know what crew got sent out that day to put the roof in. One of the things is when they're putting the shingles on the roof, they just got this nice nail gun, and they're just boom, 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 boom. Well, there's an actual line in the shingle that says don't nail below this line, and a lot of times they're boom, 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 bunch of shingles or nails under that line, and now we got exposed nails that you just punched a hole in your roof, basically. And it's not like immediately you're going to have leaking taking place because that nail's there, but over time, potentially it could start rusting. Other things can develop there, and it doesn't take much at all to begin a leak. And a lot of times you don't even notice a roof leak until it's really soaked through all the insulation and everything else and caused a lot of issues in your attic before you actually find it.
And for exposed nails, how do you fix that?
Yep, it's actually not a difficult fix at all. It's called mastic. It's basically a sealant that would just seal up. The issue with it is you just got to go up there periodically and maintain it now. It's just caused more roof because he got a little lazy with his nail gun.
Now I want to talk about some things that are very common, at least in my experience as a real estate agent. When I am looking at these inspection reports with my clients, things that pop up a lot are old piping and radon. So let's first talk about old piping and one of the services that you provide to catch this.
Yeah. So I think you're talking about the sewer lines, right? We've got some really old neighborhoods and we've got some really new neighborhoods, right? And that's just the nature with all the growth, right? But especially in our older neighborhoods, where you're going to see some more of the more affordable homes, but they're 100 plus years old, right? They used the materials that they had available to them. Big ones are going to be cast iron. Orangeburg is a big one used in the early 1900s. These are sewer lines that are very old now. And the only way to see how they're holding up at this point is with a special camera. We use it. We call it a sewer camera or sewer scope. And it's just a little camera that goes on the end of a rod, and we just push that rod down the line. And so it gives us on our camera a nice little view of the condition of it. And so if you've ever heard of a sewer line backup, that's where that's coming from, right? And so if you've got an issue, I think you mentioned earlier, we found one where there was a bunch of roots growing into this sewer line. And so if poop's not going downhill, it's coming back uphill, right?
Yeah, and how horrible would that be? Yeah, actually, I was just telling Brandon that I have a client that's buying a house in Shelley. It's a 100-year-old home, but it's been completely updated. So new wiring, new plumbing in the house. But then once we got a sewer scope, the camera to go through the pipe for the pipe going out of the house, he couldn't even get it past, I think it was 12 feet or something like that, maybe less, because of all the roots. And if my clients didn't do this, they would have purchased this house, used the toilet, and then that water, like you said, not go anywhere. And they are brand new first-time home buyers. They don't have a huge budget. They don't have, a yearly or monthly budget to fix up homes, as every homeowner should, but they are buying a house for the first time. And so I'm so glad we caught that. So now that we can request that from the seller, because the seller also had no idea. And it was so bad that we got a second opinion, because inspectors are generalists, and so we got a specialist, we got a plumber in there just to see if we can get more information. And same thing, the plumber couldn't get his camera down either. And he said it needs to be completely replaced, and he said I wouldn't even use the toilet. That's how bad it was. So now we're in that process of requesting that from the seller, and the seller is totally cool about addressing it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, and here's just another example. There's actually a few years ago I found an article in the East Idaho News that was telling a story about a family that bought a house. I want to say it was Blackfoot, and it just turned out to be this horror story of they didn't get a sewer scope. I don't think we were involved at all in this. It might have been even before we opened up our business, but they moved into the house. Within a week, the sewer line had backed up into their house. So here they are. They've got a backup. They got to clean up the basement, and imagine that. And I want to say it was something like $8,000 is what they mentioned. And again, this is like early 2020 maybe time, that in that time range. So maybe even more from since then.
Yeah.
But so just that, and then the sewer line replacement was $10,000. So between the two, you're almost at a $20,000 bill. When I think our charge, if you just added the sewer scope alone, that's like $200.
Right, exactly. So you can get ahead of it. And you're responsible for the entire pipe from your house until it connects to the city line.
That's right.
So even if it's partly in the street and outside of your property line, you are responsible for the entire portion until it connects to the next line, which is, that can also be a huge expense.
Right. And that's where some of that huge cost comes in, is now you're digging up not only your yard, but you're also cutting into the street and making repairs there, and then you've got to patch the street up again, and that's just a big mess.
Exactly. So I'm a huge proponent, especially if it's an old home, and especially if I see a lot of trees in the front. I highly recommend getting the Elite package that includes the sewer scope. Sometimes people get it on new construction. Yeah. Things can be found in new construction, but it depends on, their budget and their priorities. But at least on the old homes with trees, it's totally recommended.
Me personally, I would never buy a house without the sewer scope and the radon test. And I say that because of our experience, we see these things every day. Crushed sewer lines in brand new houses. Maybe a rock was sitting on top when they backfilled it, and then they ran over with some heavy equipment in the yard, crushed the sewer line. We've seen just like full of junk and debris, or even like, believe it or not, we'd see like Gatorade bottles in the sewer line.
Oh my gosh.
So, and again, where's the Gatorade bottle going to go? It's just going to stay there, right, and cause issues. So.
How do you get it out? Do you vacuum it out?
It depends. It depends, but a lot of times you got to dig it up and cut it out.
Oh my goodness. So you mentioned radon.
Yep.
Radon, I actually never heard of radon until I moved to Idaho, until I got into real estate and found out that Idaho, and I think Utah and some other states, but definitely Idaho and Utah are high radon states. So tell me what radon is. Yeah. Why should you test for it?
Yep. So radon is a naturally occurring gas. It's just found in the ground below us, and it's actually the breakdown of certain elements in the ground. I don't need to go into too much of the details, but that's what it is. And it just basically works its way out of the ground, and it finds its way into our homes. And so the reason we want to know about it is because radon sounds like radiation, right? And so there's a correlation between being radioactive. And so when we breathe the radon gas, it can over time cause issues and damage our lungs. And potentially there is a correlation between breathing high levels of radon and lung cancer. And so in fact, it's, according to the EPA, it's the #1 cause of lung cancer in non-smokers.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So you definitely want to test for it. And the good news is that even if your house is tested for astronomical radon levels, there is a way to mitigate it. And once it's mitigated forever. And there's a few companies out here that do that, where they basically dig in the ground, they create like a venting system, and it vents out of the house forever. And so once they do that, the radon you can retest. You could test every year if you want. It's a very simple test to make sure that those stay low. It might not ever get to 0, but it'll be within a safe range. Is that right?
Yeah, and again, that's why we test for it, is we want to make sure that there's safe levels in the home you're buying. And if there's not, even like you said, even if it's astronomically high, there's always a mitigation process that can take place, and it's really not even that expensive. I think it's like a couple $1,000s. Don't quote me on that, but
yeah, no, it is. Yeah, $2,000 or less, depending on the size of the house, to mitigate it. And sellers are willing to do that because they understand the importance of doing that.
Based on Idaho, I think the Idaho Health Department actually, they say that about 40% of the homes in East Idaho, or I guess Idaho in general, have elevated levels of radon.
Oh, okay.
Just based on our testing over the last 5 or 6 years that we've done internally, we've been able to compile that data. Last we checked, it was actually 46% of the East Idaho homes that we test have elevated levels. So
Okay.
just a little piece of information there that's worthwhile. I will also just add the areas that we see the most radon activity and elevated levels. You're going to be looking into Rigby and Ryrie, and then up north into Rexburg, and then as you get further south of Idaho Falls, into really a little bit of Shelley, but also once you get into Blackfoot and then even Pocatello, we're seeing it more there too. So in Idaho Falls proper, we don't see it as much. But the funny thing about radon is it's not like, central located somewhere. It's even in our own home, in our own neighborhood. We've tested in our own neighborhood. Our home's always been pretty low, but then even if you go in different streets in our neighborhood, it's just kind of randomly elevated somewhere.
That's so interesting. And we don't really have any data as to why, right?
I mean, you do see it a little bit more commonly in the wintertime. I don't know the exact science behind it, but wintertime, for whatever reason, allows it to be, more common.
Okay, wonderful. So I don't want that to scare anybody, because we have some amazing homes in Idaho that have clear sewer lines, low radon, but even if there is a problem, you get ahead of it, you test for it, they can be fixed, and you can still get into a beautiful home, and that's why we hire inspectors. It just is that ease of mind for buyers, so that they know when they're going in exactly what they're getting. And inspectors' job is not to point out all the beautiful and wonderful things about the house. It's to point out all the things wrong with the house. And that is a good thing, because as my job, I can paint the picture for you on how you can raise your kids in this beautiful house. And then the inspector will say, well, let's get real. Let's talk about it. So you can have a 360 view of the home and make an educated decision. So on my team and how I practice with my clients, I 100% always recommend an inspection, and 100% of my clients have, because they understand the importance.
Yeah. I mean, and we're kind of that almost backup plan, right? In terms of, if you've fallen in love with a house and you envision your family there, you've got a lot of emotions tied to that, right? And we're there to be kind of the common sense second set of eyes to really help you make sure this is an appropriate house for you moving forward. So
that's perfect. So is there anything else you want to add about your experience inspecting homes in Idaho? Anything else you're noticing, things people should look for, words of caution, or anything like that?
Actually, one interesting thing, I guess I would say difference between Washington and Idaho is, in Idaho here, we're frugal. And we like to do our own repairs.
Yes.
And that's one of the most common things we see is, homeowners making their own repairs when they're not necessarily qualified, or they learned on YouTube. I'm guilty of it too.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But that's one of the things where, especially when you start getting into plumbing and you get into electrical systems, those kinds of things are pretty big deals if you don't get them just right, And so we've seen some pretty alarming, especially electrical problems or miswirings, those kinds of things where someone's adding a circuit or they're just like, oh, this will do it if I just connect this to that. And it's actually a pretty hazardous fire hazard. And so those are the things that we look for a lot of times. So just something else to keep an eye out for, I guess.
Okay. Something else that I thought of before you go is if there's one guarantee in Idaho, it's that concrete cracks.
Yes.
And we were talking a little bit about this, that people are always texting me pictures of cracks. They're like pointing out, oh my gosh, there's a crack in the foundation. There's a crack in the basement. There's a crack in the ceiling. And not all cracks are bad. It's just guaranteed to happen. That settling happens. Paint will crack because it's so dry here. So tell me a little bit about how someone could identify a crack that's actually a serious crack versus like just a regular settling crack.
Yeah. And not to get in too much of the weeds, but a lot of it is just because there's natural movement. It's actually thermodynamics. So in the hot summers and the cold winters, there's a big range. And so hot, you're usually going to see some more expansion, a lot of more contractions with the cold. And so that's where we're seeing movement. I mean, a house, especially if you're living in it, it's almost like a living organism, where there's movement and materials shift and the wind blows and there's a load on the roof, from the snow, so we got lots of things moving around. So, cracking just happens. And, a big one is the concrete. Concrete just cracks. In fact, here's a quick story. Many years ago, I was inspecting an old house in downtown Seattle. Really cool house, but it had this really big crack like this. And I was like, hey, I pointed out to the buyers. I said, hey, that's a big crack. You probably want to get a second opinion on that. I'm not an engineer, but I can see a big crack. And followed up with that client actually just a few weeks later, and they said, hey, we had an engineer look at it. He actually said it was just fine. There wasn't any major issues with it. Really what that engineer was looking for was, if you look at the top, is there shifting going on that crack? So if you've got an up and down shift, or if it's splitting, so it's a bigger split like that, that's really where you start saying, hey, there's some major settling taking place. Just another example, if we got time.
Yeah.
We don't see a whole lot of houses built on a cliffside or a ravine here, but there was another house that I was inspecting in Seattle, and I could tell that the whole hillside over the years was kind of slowly coming down the hill because the trees were actually growing sideways and up. And so I got underneath this house in the crawl space, and lo and behold, there was one of these big, huge cracks like that where the back half of the house was actually kind of falling down the hill along with the trees. So so those are the kinds of things that we see, and those are where we do get more alarmed. When we're looking at a crack in like a slab, a sidewalk, driveway, those are just going to happen because, again, we're out in the elements, and those are just going to take place just because of the way that the weather is here for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we're going to do something totally outside your realm of being an inspector.
Okay.
What are some good things that you see in houses in Idaho Falls and the surrounding areas?
Good things. I'm a big believer in metal roofs. I really like us a metal roof. They just seem to last a long time. They shed the snow a little bit better. So I like metal roofs. I like brick built houses or exteriors. They just seem to be really sturdy and strong. They hold up really well in the weather. Those are some good things. We do have some really great builders here in town. While we do find issues in some of the new construction homes, for the most part, they do a really good job, and I think they really care. We've got some good relationships with some of our builders, and so some of the new construction is done really well, so we're happy about that. If you like a nice big basement, I mean, we've got a home gym in our basement spare bedroom, and so we like that space. And then our kids love our little movie room too. So when you have that basement space, you do have a lot more space to work with. I think just if you take into account you know, main floor plus a finished basement. We actually have one of the higher average square footage, you know, in our area at least, in terms of compared to the rest of the country. So it's kind of a bonus.
I hear that a lot. People will tour homes like, this is a 3,500 square foot house. It's huge. I don't need 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. But it's because a lot of people have families and everybody wants their kid to have their own room. They want their gym. They want their movie theater room. And so the square footage is quite large for sure. In fact, it's actually harder to find brand new, smaller homes. I know Rockwell's building some, but even Rockwell homes are close to 3,000 square feet.
Yep.
So that is something that's different about Idaho. But again, yeah, Idaho's got some amazing homes. We obviously are both transplants. We love it here. It's great for your family. And is there anything else you'd like to add about inspecting houses, anything in Idaho?
The last thing I would probably add is just, and really just in general, in our experience living here, is, you know, just a family-oriented place. We love the outdoors, so we like to get out and hike and camp. And my wife loves hot springs, and so there's hot springs kind of all over Idaho and Wyoming, so we like to get out to those. So it's just a great place to live, and you know, with the growth that we're seeing, it's exciting to see, you know, people come into the area and enjoying life in Idaho.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon, for being here. This was an amazing conversation. Great to get your perspective and your professional opinion. Again, if you're new to my channel, my name is Annika Wilder. I'm a local realtor here in the Eastern Idaho area. If you're thinking about moving here, go ahead, give me a call, shoot me a text, send me email, or schedule a Zoom, and I'll be happy to help. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.